We'll come back to you. For now, we just have to cut across to the Chief of the Defence Staff, who's speaking on Operation Sindoor.
Some sort of satisfaction, anxiety during the operations, and maybe joy. So this happened during Operation Sindoor. Let me talk about reason. That's what I said that, Clause Base had attributed reason towards government. And when Operation Sindoor, as far as the government is concerned, is not about retribution. I think it was about drawing its limits of tolerance, thus and no far. So this state-sponsored terrorism from Pakistan had to stop, and Pakistan should not be able to hold hostage India to terror activities. And of course, it was also said that India is not going to live under the shadow of terror and neither nuclear blackmail. And then also this decision that we need to, since we have laid down a limit, we must act decisively. That, of course, comes out as a natural fallout of this. But there was also a desire in the government that actually it's not getting hyphenated with Pakistan, because we are on a different trajectory and a path towards progress and development. And our aspirations of 1.4 billion people are entirely different from then of our adversary. Our vision is entirely different. And our march of progress should not be stymied. It should be short kind of a war. I think these are the kinds of reasons for us which I can attribute towards the government. And the nature of conflict we fought and the type of operations that were executed were reflected in that reasoning part of what I just said. Let me now talk about the third important constitution, that is the chance. I said that military operations are highly unpredictable. And you heard that little saying that, the best plans actually go out of the window after the first bullet is fired. So, and no operation plan is based on 100% preparedness. You can't be 100% prepared for every kind of a contingency. And you can't have 100% of the information about enemy. So you are always groping in a bit of a dark when you're carrying out military operations. And of course, in every military operation, there is an element of risk involved into it. But only thing is that there should be a calculated kind of a risk. In this particular case, what I say is, and of course, nations, when they try and build their capabilities, they try and build these capabilities on their past experiences and the kind of future conflicts they'll see they might have to, or the future challenges they may be likely to grapple with. So probably post Balakot and Uri strikes, we thought that should be able to engage targets deep inside with precision strikes. So India built these kind of capabilities. On the other hand, after Balakot, because the last strike package was almost at the borders of Pakistan, so there have been air defense capabilities. Probably they built that kind of a stronger. We also thought that we had applied the land domain to carry out surgical strikes after Uri. Then we had applied the air domain, and this time we thought that to maintain that element of surprise, we'll employ one more dimension. That's in the air domain only, but slightly led by using loiter ammunitions and drones, etc., to carry out precision strikes. So when we say, if you see both these things, both nations have tried to build different kind of a capabilities. So obviously there's an inherent amount of risk into this. And none of the capabilities that we had acquired actually had been tested in battlefield. They had been tested only in ranges. So whenever we are doing it, there's always an element of risk involved into it. But as they say, you cannot succeed if you don't take that kind of a risk. We knew a little bit that we have a better counter-drone systems, etc. in our country. We have loiter ammunitions. He may not have that kind of a capability, but there's an element of risk into it. I think the second important thing is to understand as to what is a professional military force. When you talk about risks and taking of a chance, actually. I think it's a professional force that is not affected by setbacks or kind of losses, if you may say. Because in war, what is important is, even if there are setbacks, you need to maintain your morale. That morale is to remain high. And then, of course, is adaptability. That is an important constituent of a very professional force. You should be able to understand what went wrong, rectify your mistakes, and go out again. I think that is important for any kind of a professional force. And third is, I think, the offensive spirit. As an organization, you must have that offensive spirit in spite of the initial setbacks. You can't sit down in fear. And as an individual, you should not have any kind of a fear. And you should be able to display a high tempo of operations. That is a hallmark of a professional force, and that's a kind of a thing which we displayed and what I said that in a couple of my interviews that losses are not important. It's the outcome which is important. So these are the three elements, the trinity of chance, reason, and emotion about warfare. I just tried to explain it in the context of Operation Sindoor. Clausewitz is a profound scholar. He's made a couple of other precepts on warfare. I'll take one more and then try and explain this once again. Because there are many postulates of Clausewitz which are still relevant. I've chosen one which is very famous, which is that war is a continuation of policy by other means. If you look at this particular statement, I, as a scholar, as an army officer, draw two important derivatives, conclusions out of this particular statement. One is that war is a finite kind of an entity. That means there is politics, and when you fail in that politics, then you resort to use of force. So then there is war. And when war ends, politics, in the sense negotiations again start. So we have seen that in 71 war, that before that, there's politics, and then there's a 14-day war, and then again you go back to Shimla negotiations. So this is a definite end point and a start point to this activity of war. I think this particular paradigm which Clausewitz has postulated, or the conclusion which we have drawn, is entirely wrong. Today, war is a continuation of 5 C's, which I say as cooperation, competition, confrontation, conflict, and combat. That's war. In one particular sequence, they continue happening. And the state tries to include any kind of instrument which is available to it for achievement of its political objectives, that is diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. You've recently seen this war on trade and tariff, actually. That's basically for attainment of political objectives. So, and this is what I said, in Operation Sindoor also, war and politics was happening as a parallel kind of phenomenon. And it was being exercised also through communication, which I made a mention initially, both direct and indirect communication. So, second important conclusion, what I draw from the statement which I initially said, that war is a continuation of policy by other means, is that war is a rational decision. That means, and I also spoke about reason when I said about government takes a rational decision about war. And this takes the decision when it has exhausted all its other instruments of power. So, but then the important question comes in, this whole start point of this particular war was this Pahalgam terror attacks. So is terrorism a rational act of warfare? I don't think that's a rational act, because terrorism has no defined logic. It has no politico-military end state. Terrorism is a means and an end in itself. Terrorism is a form of warfare that defines rationality. This is because the terrorist doesn't have anything to lose. He's a non-state actor. So he doesn't have a state. So if he doesn't have a state, he's not worried about territory, people, or the ideology, which form the 3 important constituents of a state. So this is terrorism absolutely irrational if it is happening in a standalone mode. But what happens when, there is about state-sponsored terrorism? Is this rational? I think that, this seems to be a rational decision when state is employing terrorism as an instrument to achieve political objectives. And say so it's a reasoned kind of a decision which state takes, and so as our adversary is concerned, he's taken the decision that to bleed India by 1,000 cuts. And when I say that this has been a state policy, this I'm not saying. If you go and look at the literature on issues, you'll find Peter Chark, Kristen Fair, who have cited former Director Generals of ISI, explicating this particular strategy as to how they will bleed India by 1,000 cuts. And this particular doctrine is found in various studies in Pakistan, Staff College, Quetta, etc. So this is a normal talk which happens in Pakistan. And of course, officially we know in the 1965, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto declared a 1,000-year war against India when he addressed the United Nations Security Council. And probably Ziaul Haq gave form to this particular doctrine of 1,000 years war. And someone added that you should add this 1,000 cuts into it. And similar kind of venom was spewed by General Asim Munir against India and Hindus, speech just few days or weeks before what happened in Pahalgam. So, since this is a rigid decision, it can be also, I believe, that retracted because now Pakistan is faced with a different kind of a prospect that he faces military action in case we find terror happening against us. And also, we said that we'll have water as well as, this thing will not float together. So we have kind of raised the bar. We have connected terror to water, and we have drawn out the new lines for military operations against terror.
Right, that was the Chief of the Defence Staff, General Chauhan, there, saying that, what really happens in war, the losses are not important, but what really is important is the outcome. And of course, the capabilities have been built up post Balakot and Uri, but there was a risk factor involved. We'll get you the latest on the other side. For now, slipping into a short break.